The desert sun beat down on the firing range as the general pulled his sidearm, aiming at the small female medic standing 30 yards away. A hush fell over the gathered elite forces as he fired 5 live rounds into the dirt around her feet. Everyone expected fear. They got ice-cold calculation instead. When she walked back and took his pistol without permission, analyzing his poor shooting technique in front of everyone, the mood shifted instantly. But it wasn't her weapons knowledge that silenced them all. It was what fell from her pocket, a challenge coin that shouldn't exist, from a unit the Pentagon denied ever existed. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If this story intrigues you, consider subscribing for more untold military stories that change how we understand true courage. The sun had barely crept over the eastern ridge when Staff Sergeant Briar Thorne stepped off the transport helicopter at Maverick Joint Training Facility. The rotors kicked up a swirl of Nevada desert dust that clung to her uniform and stung her eyes, but she remained perfectly still, waiting for the cloud to settle before retrieving her duffel bag. Around her, chaos reigned as soldiers from multiple branches hustled equipment, shouted orders, and established their presence at the classified compound. No one paid attention to the slight woman with the medical insignia on her shoulder. At 5'6", with her hair pulled back in a regulation bun, Briar blended into the background, exactly as she preferred. She observed the arriving units with quiet intensity. Marine Force Recon swaggering past Army Rangers, SEAL team members eyeing Air Force pararescue specialists, all sizing each other up before the joint exercise commenced. Briar made her way to the medical tent, moving with a smooth efficiency that belied the slight favoring of her left leg. Inside, she methodically unpacked her supplies, arranging gauze, antiseptic, and emergency trauma kits with practiced hands. Her movements were precise, almost surgical in their economy. Staff Sergeant Thorne, a voice interrupted her inventory. She turned to find Colonel Westergaard standing at the tent entrance, his weathered face revealing nothing of his thoughts. "Sir," she replied, coming to attention. "At ease. There's been a change to your assignment." He consulted the tablet in his hand. "You're being reassigned to supervise the firing range qualification drills." Briar's expression remained neutral, though her eyes narrowed slightly. "Range supervision, sir? That's not typically a medical staff assignment. Orders came from above. Report to Range Delta at 0500 tomorrow." The colonel handed her a digital clipboard to sign. "Any questions, Sergeant?" "No, sir." As Vestergaard departed, Briar noticed a group of Rangers outside the tent who had overheard the exchange. They exchanged glances, one of them smirking. Range supervision was notorious busy work, typically reserved for cadets or soldiers being punished for minor infractions. Staff Sergeant Quinlan, a broad-shouldered man with kind eyes that contradicted his intimidating frame, approached her as she continued her inventory. "That's punishment duty for cadets, not for someone with your experience," he said quietly. "Especially not for a combat medic with your record." Briar didn't look up from her supplies. "Orders are orders." "Did you step on someone's toes, Thorne?" "Not that I'm aware of." Quinlan watched her methodically organizing medical supplies, his brow furrowed. "Well, if you need anything, let me know. The range can be a political minefield around here." Briar nodded, offering a small smile that didn't reach her eyes. As Quinlan turned to leave, he noticed the almost imperceptible limp in her gait as she moved to place bandages on a high shelf. "Afghanistan?" he asked softly. She paused, her back still to him. "Something like that." Quinlan recognized the tone. The conversation was over. He departed with a respectful nod, leaving Briar alone with her thoughts and her supplies. The compound came alive as the day progressed. Maverick was a maze of temporary structures, concrete bunkers, and training grounds designed to prepare elite forces for joint operations in hostile territory. The facility was nestled deep in restricted government land, mountains rising in the distance like silent sentinels. At the command center, officers from various branches congregated for the first briefing at 1100 hours. Briar slipped into the back row of the briefing room, standing at attention against the wall. Around her, officers with far more impressive insignia filled the seats. She felt eyes on her, a medic out of place, but kept her gaze forward, focused on nothing in particular. The room fell silent as Brigadier General Harlan Blackwood strode in. At 58, Blackwood carried himself with the rigid posture of someone who had spent a lifetime making others conform to his expectations. His close-cropped silver hair and piercing blue eyes gave him an appearance of perpetual scrutiny. The collection of medals on his chest told a story of distinguished service, but it was his reputation that commanded the room. They called him the Undertaker, not for the lives he'd taken in combat, but for the careers he'd buried and the spirits he'd broken in training. Soldiers feared his training rotations more than actual deployments. "Gentlemen," Blackwood began, his voice carrying through the room without needing to raise it. "And ladies," he added, with a cursory nod to the handful of female officers present. "Welcome to Maverick. For those who haven't trained here before, understand this. We are not here to coddle. We are not here to make friends. We are here to forge the kind of soldiers who will not break when everything around them has gone to hell." The assembled officers nodded in agreement, all except Major Adrian Reeves, who sat silently in the second row, his expression unreadable. Breyer noticed his stillness amid the chorus of affirmation. "This isn't summer camp," Blackwood continued. "Break them down before they break in the field. I want every soldier pushed beyond their limits. I want them questioning whether they belong in this elite company. The weak links will reveal themselves, and we will cut them loose." As Blackwood outlined the training schedule, his gaze swept the room and landed on Breyer, standing quietly at the back. He paused mid-sentence. "Staff Sergeant Thorne?" His voice carried a note of surprise. "You're out of place. Medical personnel report to Field Hospital Command." Every head in the room turned to look at her. Breyer kept her eyes fixed on Blackwood. "I've been reassigned to range supervision, sir." A murmur passed through the room. Blackwood studied her face, as if trying to place it from somewhere in his past. A flicker of something, recognition, confusion, crossed his features before vanishing behind his professional mask. "Interesting choice," he said finally. "We'll see how you perform." There was an edge to his voice that suggested the assignment hadn't been his idea. The briefing continued, but Breyer could feel Blackwood's eyes returning to her periodically. As the meeting adjourned, officers filed out, many casting curious glances her way. Major Reeves approached her as she prepared to leave. "The general doesn't typically notice support staff," he observed quietly. "Better to remain unnoticed, sir," Breyer replied. Reeves tilted his head slightly. "And yet, here you are, at the firing range instead of the medical tent." His fingers absently traced a thin scar that ran along his neck, just above his collar. "Curious assignment." "Just following orders, Major." "Aren't we all?" Reeves offered a tight smile before departing, leaving Breyer to wonder about the conversation's undertones. By 1500 hours, Breyer had reported to firing range Delta. The desert sun hung mercilessly overhead, heat rippling from the packed earth. She methodically checked each shooting station, inspecting the targets, safety equipment, and ammunition stores. Her hands moved over the weapons with the confidence of someone intimately familiar with their operation. Captain Sorrell, the range safety officer, watched her from the observation post, curiosity evident in his expression. He approached as she finished checking the final station. "You handle weapons like you've done more than just patch wounds, Sergeant Thorne," he remarked, not unkindly. Breyer secured the last rifle and turned to face him. "Every medic should understand what causes the injuries they treat." "Fair enough," Sorrell nodded, unconvinced. "But most medics I know couldn't field strip and reassemble an M4 with that kind of precision." Before Breyer could respond, the arrival of a SEAL team drew their attention. The sailors moved with the characteristic swagger of special operators, led by a tall, dark-skinned officer with lieutenant commander, insignia, Zephyr. He nodded at Captain Sorrell, then noticed Breyer. "You're new to range duty?" Zephyr asked, his tone conversational, but his eyes evaluating. "Recent assignment, sir," Breyer replied. Zephyr opened his mouth to inquire further, but the crackling of the PA system interrupted. "All units, stand by for demonstration," Blackwood's voice boomed across the range. "General approaching range." The atmosphere shifted instantly. Soldiers straightened, equipment was double-checked, and conversations died. Breyer felt a tightening in her chest, a soldier's instinct that something was about to go sideways. General Blackwood arrived minutes later, accompanied by a small entourage of foreign military observers. Attachés from allied nations, Breyer guessed, brought in to observe American training methods. Blackwood moved with the confidence of a man accustomed to commanding attention, positioning himself center stage. "Gentlemen," he addressed the foreign delegates, "today we demonstrate American precision under pressure, the finest soldiers in the world, trained to execute perfectly regardless of circumstances." His gaze swept the range, landing on Breyer once again. A smile that didn't reach his eyes spread across his face. "Staff Sergeant Thorne," he called out. "Perfect timing. You'll assist with our demonstration." The range fell silent. Breyer stepped forward, her face betraying nothing of her thoughts. Blackwood's aide approached, carrying a ballistic vest. "Put this on," Blackwood instructed, "then walk to the 30-yard marker and stand facing us." Uncertain murmurs rippled through the assembled soldiers. Captain Sorrell stepped forward, concern etched on his face. "Sir, range protocol dictates that—" Blackwood cut him off sharply. "Are you questioning my orders, Captain?" Sorrell stiffened. "No, sir." "Good." Blackwood turned back to Breyer, who had already donned the vest. "Proceed to the marker, Sergeant." Sorrell shot Breyer an apologetic look, but she had already started walking, her movements measured and calm. The desert wind whipped her hair, pulling strands loose from her bun. As she reached the marker and turned to face the group, her mind flashed briefly to another desert, another time, heat and sand, and the metallic taste of fear. She pushed the memory away, focusing on the present moment. From 30 yards, Breyer could see the foreign observers watching with interest. The American soldiers looked uncomfortable, sensing something wasn't right. Blackwood stood front and center, saying something to the delegates that she couldn't hear over the wind. Then he drew his sidearm, a standard-issue M9 Beretta. The range fell completely silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Blackwood raised the pistol, aiming directly at Breyer. She didn't flinch, didn't shift her weight, didn't raise her hands or shout a protest. Instead, a strange calm washed over her, familiar as an old friend. Her breathing slowed, her vision narrowed, focusing not on the barrel pointed at her chest, but on Blackwood's trigger finger and the tension in his arm. Something in her stance shifted almost imperceptibly. A subtle transition from medical professional to something else entirely. Her eyes, which had seemed unremarkable moments before, now held the cold calculation of a predator. Anyone watching closely enough would have seen it. The transformation from prey to hunter in the blink of an eye. Blackwood's finger tightened on the trigger. The sound of gunfire cracked across the desert. 5 rapid shots, not at her body, but into the sand around her feet. Dust exploded upward, momentarily obscuring her from view. When it cleared, Breyer hadn't moved an inch. Her expression remained unchanged, as if someone firing live rounds at her feet was an everyday occurrence. Nervous laughter rippled through some of the younger soldiers. Blackwood holstered his weapon with a flourish, turning to the foreign observers. "And that, gentlemen, is why American forces maintain discipline under fire," he announced proudly. "Even our medical personnel demonstrate perfect composure in volatile situations." The delegates nodded, their expressions revealing they were impressed not by Blackwood's theatrics but by Breyer's composure. She stood still, looking down at the bullet holes in the sand around her feet. Her mind calculated angles, velocity, and spread with automatic precision. She saw the pattern for what it was, not a carefully planned demonstration, but a display of mediocre marksmanship disguised as control. Her eyes traced another pattern, overlaid on this one. Different bullets, different desert, different stakes. The memory surfaced unwillingly. Muzzle flashes in darkness, the weight of a wounded soldier across her shoulders, the taste of blood and sand. Breyer blinked, returning to the present. She began walking slowly back toward the group, her steps measured and deliberate. As she approached, she noticed Major Reeves watching intently, his hand once again moving unconsciously to the scar on his neck. Their eyes met briefly, his questioning, hers revealing nothing. Blackwood was basking in the attention of the foreign delegates, explaining something about stress inoculation training. He barely glanced at Breyer as she reached the group, clearly considering her role in his demonstration complete. But Breyer wasn't finished. She stopped directly in front of Blackwood, interrupting his conversation. Without speaking, she held out her hand, palm up. Confusion flickered across his face. "Is there a problem, Sergeant?" "Your sidearm, sir," she said, her voice calm and even. "May I?" Blackwood's expression darkened, but with foreign observers watching, he couldn't easily refuse such a simple request. With poorly concealed irritation, he drew his pistol and handed it to her, grip first. The range had gone silent again. Every eye was on Briar as she took the weapon. With practiced precision, she ejected the magazine, checked the chamber, and cleared the weapon. Her hands moved with the fluid confidence of someone who had performed these actions thousands of times under far worse circumstances than a training demonstration. "Your grouping indicates a 4-degree right bias, sir," she said, voice clear enough to carry to the assembled soldiers. "Likely due to improper trigger control." A collective intake of breath rippled through the ranks. No one corrected a general's shooting technique, especially not in public, and especially not a staff sergeant with medical insignia. Blackwood's face flushed red, but Briar continued her assessment before he could respond. "Your second and fifth rounds would have missed center mass on a moving target. In a combat situation, that's 2 opportunities for an enemy to return fire." Stunned silence hung over the range. The foreign delegates exchanged glances, reassessing both Blackwood and the unassuming medic who had just publicly dissected his marksmanship. Blackwood's face darkened with anger and embarrassment, but he maintained enough composure to respond with forced casualness. "That's quite the analysis from a field medic," he said, voice tight with controlled rage. "Who taught you to shoot, Sergeant?" Briar held his gaze, her expression neutral. "The same person who taught me to save lives when shooting fails." The atmosphere crackled with tension. Something passed between them, not just the conflict of the moment, but something deeper, like the shadow of a shared history neither was acknowledging. Blackwood attempted to reassert control, turning to address the assembled soldiers with a strained smile. "Perhaps Staff Sergeant Thorne should give us all shooting lessons." More nervous laughter, but it died quickly as Briar remained unmoved by the attempt at humor. Her posture was perfect, her expression professional, but something about her presence had shifted. The soldiers sensed it. The quiet confidence of someone who had nothing to prove, because she had already proven everything when it mattered most. Lieutenant Commander Zephyr had been watching the exchange with increasing interest. Now he stepped forward, studying Briar more intently. "Sir," he addressed Blackwood, "with respect, I'd like to see the sergeant's qualifications." Blackwood seized the opportunity to shift focus away from his embarrassment. "Yes, let's see what makes our medic such an expert." Briar met Zephyr's gaze, a silent understanding passing between them. She recognized the look in his eyes, not the challenge Blackwood assumed, but genuine curiosity, maybe even recognition. "My record speaks for itself, Commander," she replied evenly. As she moved to return the now cleared weapon to Blackwood, something fell from the pocket of her uniform. A worn photograph and a metal object hit the sand, catching the sun's reflection. Briar quickly knelt to retrieve them, but not before Zephyr caught a glimpse of what had fallen. His expression changed instantly to one of shock and reverence. "That's not possible," he whispered, loud enough only for those closest to hear. Briar pocketed the items quickly, but the damage was done. She handed the pistol back to Blackwood, who took it with poorly concealed resentment. Zephyr stepped forward suddenly, addressing Blackwood with newfound intensity. "Sir, may I ask where Staff Sergeant Thorne served before this assignment?" The question hung in the desert air like a mirage, wavering and uncertain. Blackwood fumbled for an answer, clearly caught off guard. "That information is classified," Briar interrupted smoothly. Zephyr's voice dropped to just above a whisper. "Not to someone who recognized what just fell from your pocket." Every eye turned to Briar's hand, now tightly clutching whatever she had retrieved from the sand. The desert wind picked up around them, whipping dust into small spirals, nature itself holding its breath for what would come next. Something unspoken passed between Briar and Zephyr, a recognition, an acknowledgement of a shared secret. For the first time since arriving at Maverick, Briar's composed facade showed the faintest crack. Her fingers tightened around the object in her palm, knuckles whitening with the pressure. "Would you recognize the heroes who walk among us if they weren't wearing medals? Have you ever met someone whose quiet strength spoke volumes more than their rank or title? Share your experience in the comments below, and if this story resonates with you, subscribe for more untold stories of extraordinary courage hidden in plain sight." Briar's fingers closed around the challenge coin, its weight familiar in her palm. For a moment, the present faded, and she was back there, the night illuminated by gunfire, the radio crackling with desperate calls for extraction, the weight of wounded men on her shoulders. She blinked the memory away, focusing on Zephyr's shocked expression. A flash of understanding passed between them. Whatever he thought he knew about her, whatever he had recognized, would change everything if spoken aloud. Blackwood cleared his throat, visibly uncomfortable with the sudden shift in dynamics. "This demonstration is concluded," he announced sharply. "All units return to scheduled training." The soldiers hesitated, sensing the unresolved tension. Captain Sorrell stepped in, ordering the troops back to their stations. Slowly, reluctantly, they dispersed, casting curious glances back at the trio still locked in silent confrontation. Once they were relatively alone, Blackwood turned to Briar, his voice low and dangerous. "I don't know what game you're playing, Sergeant, but undermining a superior officer in front of foreign officials and our own troops is grounds for discipline. With respect, sir, I was asked to evaluate your shooting technique. I did so honestly." Briar's voice remained calm, professional. "You were asked to stand still and follow orders," Blackwood hissed. "Not to provide commentary," Zephyr interrupted, his tone carefully neutral. "General, if I might have a word with Staff Sergeant Thorne, SEAL Team 8 could use her expertise on our medical evacuation protocols." Blackwood's eyes narrowed suspiciously, but with foreign observers still within earshot, he couldn't easily refuse. "Fine, you have 30 minutes, then Sergeant Thorne reports back to range duty." He stalked away, tension evident in every line of his body. The foreign delegates followed, having been gestured over by one of Blackwood's aides. Zephyr waited until they were out of earshot before turning to Briar. "Walk with me, Sergeant." They moved away from the range toward a secluded area between two equipment sheds. The desert stretched before them, heat rising in visible waves. In the distance, mountains shimmered like mirages. "That was a Wraith unit coin," Zephyr said without preamble. It wasn't a question. Briar said nothing, her eyes scanning the horizon. "I served with Talon Team in 2019, Zephyr continued. "We were support for an operation that officially never happened, a covert extraction in Romani province that went sideways." He studied her profile. There were rumors about a unit that came in after everything went to hell. 6 operators with no official designation. "Rumors are just rumors, Commander," Briar replied, her voice giving away nothing. "Except when they're not." Zephyr's voice dropped lower. "They said one of them was a woman, small build, medic training, pulled 3 critically wounded men out under direct fire after their CO froze up." He paused. "They called her Wraith 7. Briar turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "What exactly are you asking me, Commander?" "I'm not asking anything," Zephyr said quietly. "I'm telling you that I know who you are, and I'm wondering why someone like you is here, being used as a prop in Blackwood's ego show, instead of commanding your own unit." A gust of wind blew strands of hair across Briar's face. She tucked them back methodically, buying time to consider her response. "The Pentagon has no record of any unit called Wraith," she said finally, "and I'm just a combat medic assigned to range duty." Zephyr nodded slowly, understanding the message beneath her words. "Of course, my mistake." He extended his hand. "Either way, it's an honor to serve with you, Staff Sergeant Thorne." She took his hand, the handshake brief but firm. Something passed between them, respect, recognition, a silent agreement. "Your 30 minutes starts now, Commander," Briar said, her voice lighter. "What did you want to know about medical evacuation protocols?" They spent the remainder of their time discussing legitimate tactical medicine procedures, both aware they were likely being observed from a distance. When they parted, Zephyr offered a subtle nod that carried more weight than a formal salute. Briar returned to the range, where Captain Sorrell waited with barely concealed curiosity. "Everything all right, Sergeant?" "Just fine, Captain. Shall we resume the qualification drills?" The remainder of the afternoon passed without incident. Briar supervised the range with quiet efficiency, offering occasional guidance to soldiers who struggled with their accuracy. Word of her confrontation with Blackwood had spread through the compound, and she noticed the shift in how the troops regarded her, curiosity mixed with newfound respect. As the day's training concluded, Major Reeves appeared at her side while she was securing the weapons lockers. "Interesting first day, Sergeant Thorne," he observed, helping her close the final locker. "Not how I expected it to go, sir," she admitted. Reeves leaned against the lockers, his posture casual, but his eyes intent. "Blackwood has a reputation for breaking people, testing their limits to see if they're worthy of serving under him. I'm aware of his methods, and yet you stood your ground. Reeves absently touched the scar on his neck again. Not many would have had the composure to do that. Breyer secured the final lock. I've faced worse than an officer with something to prove. I believe you have. Reeves straightened. Join me for dinner at the officers' mess. You've earned it after today. Breyer hesitated, then shook her head. Thank you, sir, but I should prepare for tomorrow's duties. Reeves nodded, unsurprised. Another time, perhaps. He turned to leave, then paused. Whatever brought you to Maverick, Thorne, I'm glad you're here. Some of these soldiers could learn a lot from you, about more than just marksmanship. After he left, Breyer remained in the empty range, watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of gold and crimson. The mountains in the distance turned purple with shadow. In the stillness, she removed the challenge coin from her pocket, running her thumb over its worn surface. The winged serpent wrapped around a medical caduceus caught the dying light. 6 units issued, 5 buried with their owners, the last remaining testament to a unit that officially never existed. She closed her fist around it, feeling the edges bite into her palm. The pain anchored her to the present, keeping the memories at bay. For now. The mess hall buzzed with conversation when Breyer entered that evening. She collected a tray of food and found a quiet corner table, away from the clusters of soldiers exchanging stories and building camaraderie. Several heads turned as she passed, whispers following in her wake. That's her, the medic who called out the general's shooting. I heard she's ex-special forces. Someone said Commander Zephyr recognized her from some classified op. Breyer ignored the speculation, focusing on her meal. She had just taken a bite when a shadow fell across her table. She looked up to find Lieutenant Commander Zephyr standing there with his tray. Mind if I join you, Sergeant? Without waiting for a response, he set his tray down and took a seat opposite her. Behind him, a group of SEALs watched with interest. Your men are curious, Breyer noted, nodding toward the watching SEALs. Zephyr shrugged. They've been speculating about you all afternoon. Thought I'd get some facts straight from the source. Not much to tell, Breyer replied, taking another bite. See, that's where I disagree. Zephyr leaned forward, voice low. A combat medic who can outshoot most of the operators here and stands her ground against a general? That's a story worth hearing. Before Breyer could respond, another tray clattered onto the table. Major Reeves slid into the seat beside her. Hope I'm not interrupting, he said, his tone making it clear he didn't particularly care if he was. Not at all, Major, Zephyr replied, his expression carefully neutral. Just getting to know Sergeant Thorne better. Funny coincidence, Reeves said, unwrapping his utensils. That's exactly what I was planning to do. The tension between the two officers was palpable. Breyer continued eating, seemingly unbothered by their territorial display. Sergeant Thorne was just about to tell me about her previous assignments, Zephyr prompted. I doubt that, Reeves countered. The sergeant strikes me as someone who lets her actions speak louder than words. Breyer set down her fork. Gentlemen, I appreciate the interest, but there's not much to tell. Standard deployments, standard duties. Standard duties don't usually earn this kind of attention from Blackwood, Reeves observed. He singled you out within hours of your arrival. Zephyr nodded. The general's not known for noticing medical personnel unless they've done something exceptional, or unless he has history with them. Breyer's expression remained neutral, but her fingers tightened almost imperceptibly around her water glass. Perhaps he just needed someone for his demonstration, and I was convenient. Neither officer looked convinced. How long have you been a combat medic, Sergeant? Reeves asked, changing tactics. 8 years. Deployments? 3 to Afghanistan, 2 to Syria, various shorter assignments. Under which commands? Zephyr pressed. Breyer met his gaze evenly. That information is classified beyond your clearance, Commander. A flash of triumph crossed Zephyr's face. She had just confirmed his suspicions without saying anything explicit. Reeves noticed the exchange and frowned. You know something I don't, Commander? Just connecting dots, Zephyr replied cryptically. Breyer stood, gathering her tray. If you'll excuse me, gentlemen, I have an early start tomorrow. As she walked away, she heard Reeves ask Zephyr in a lowered voice. What was on that coin you saw? She didn't hear Zephyr's response, but she felt his eyes on her back as she left the mess hall. The night was cold, the desert temperature dropping dramatically after sunset. Briar's boots crunched on the gravel as she made her way to her assigned quarters, a small room in the women's barracks, most female. Personnel were gathered in the common area, but Briar bypassed them, seeking solitude. Her room was Spartan, a narrow bed, a desk, a footlocker for personal items. She closed the door and sat on the edge of the bed, removing the photograph and challenge coin from her pocket. The photograph showed 6 figures in tactical gear, faces obscured by night vision goggles and balaclavas. They stood against a desert backdrop, weapons held casually but ready. Despite the concealment, there was something distinctly feminine about the smallest figure, standing slightly apart from the others. Briar traced the outline of each person with her finger. 4 of them would never stand like this again. 4 graves, unmarked and unacknowledged. 4 friends whose sacrifice remained classified. She tucked the photo away and lay back on her bed, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow would bring more scrutiny, more questions. Blackwood wouldn't let her public criticism go unanswered, and now Zephyr knew or suspected enough to be dangerous. Sleep came fitfully, punctuated by dreams of gunfire and sand. Dawn broke with the insistent blaring of the compound's reveille. Briar was already awake, completing her morning push-ups with mechanical precision. By the time the other women stirred, she had showered, dressed, and headed for the medical tent to check supplies before reporting to the range. The day promised to be hotter than the previous one, the desert already shimmering with rising heat as Briar crossed the compound. She noted the increased activity, more units arriving, equipment being unloaded, training scenarios being prepared. The joint exercise was ramping up. At the medical tent, she found Dr. Farrow, the chief medical officer, reviewing inventory. "Sergeant Thorne," he greeted her. "I was beginning to think you'd been permanently reassigned to range duty." "Just checking in, sir, making sure my supplies are in order." Farrow raised an eyebrow. "Heard you had quite the introduction yesterday, standing up to Blackwood in front of everyone." "Just doing my job, sir." "Well, your job should be here, treating twisted ankles and heat exhaustion, not playing target practice for Blackwood's ego trips." Farrow handed her a tablet. "I've filed a formal request to have you return to medical duty. Just need your signature." Briar hesitated, then handed the tablet back unsigned. "I appreciate the effort, Doctor, but I'll complete my current assignment." Farrow looked surprised. "You want to stay on range duty after yesterday?" "I believe I can be effective there." "More effective than treating actual patients?" Briar's expression remained neutral. "Sometimes prevention is better than treatment." Farrow studied her with newfound interest. "You're not what you seem, are you, Sergeant Thorne?" "I'm exactly what my file says I am, sir. A combat medic doing her duty." "If you say so." Farrow accepted the tablet back. "But if you change your mind, my request stands ready." Briar thanked him and departed, aware that she had just added another name to the growing list of people intrigued by her presence at Maverick. At Firing Range Delta, Captain Sorrell was already setting up for the day's qualifications. He nodded in greeting as Briar approached. "Morning, Sergeant. Ready for round 2? "Any specific unit scheduled today?" she asked, helping him arrange target silhouettes. "Army Rangers in the morning, Marine Force Recon after lunch." Sorrell hesitated. "And General Blackwood is bringing his staff for a special session at 1400. Briar's hands stilled momentarily before resuming their task. "I see." "Look," Sorrell said, lowering his voice. "After yesterday, everyone's talking. Blackwood's not the type to let something like that slide. Whatever history is between you two, it's going to come to a head." "There's no history, Captain, just a professional disagreement." Sorrell didn't look convinced. "Well, whatever it is, watch your back today. Blackwood didn't get those stars by being forgiving." The morning passed in a blur of routine. Briar supervised qualification drills with quiet efficiency, offering occasional corrections to soldiers' stances or breathing techniques. Word of her confrontation with Blackwood had spread, and many approached their sessions with her with heightened attention, eager to impress the medic who had stood her ground against a general. Around noon, as the Rangers were completing their rotations, Lieutenant Commander Zephyr appeared at the range with several of his SEALs. "Sergeant Thorne," he called out, "got time for some advanced tactical shooting drills with my team?" Captain Sorrell consulted the schedule. "You're not slotted until tomorrow, Commander. Just thought we'd get some practice in, if the sergeant doesn't mind." All eyes turned to Briar, who nodded once. Happy to assist, Commander. The SEALs spread out to various stations, each taking up position with practiced ease. Zephyr approached Briar, speaking quietly. Thought you could use some friendly faces this afternoon when Blackwood returns. I can handle Blackwood, she replied. No doubt, but it doesn't hurt to have witnesses who aren't in his chain of command. Zephyr checked his weapon. Especially witnesses who might have some idea what that coin in your pocket really means. Briar's expression remained neutral. You seem very interested in my personal effects, Commander. Let's just say I have a deep respect for certain units that officially don't exist. Zephyr held her gaze. And for the operators who served in them. Before she could respond, a commotion at the range entrance drew their attention. Major Reeves strode in, accompanied by several officers Briar didn't recognize. His eyes scanned the range until they found her. Sergeant Thorne, he called. A word. Briar excused herself from Zephyr and crossed to where Reeves waited. Sir? Walk with me, Reeves said, gesturing away from the range. They moved out of earshot of the others, the sun beating down mercilessly on their shoulders. Blackwood's on the warpath, Reeves said without preamble. Last night he made some calls about your service record. Briar's step faltered almost imperceptibly. My record is straightforward, sir. That's just it. Reeves stopped, turning to face her. Parts of it are too straightforward. Cookie-cutter deployments, standard evaluations, and then there are the gaps. 6 months here, 8 months there, listed simply as specialized training with no details. Many soldiers undergo specialized training, Major. Not with the kind of security clearance these gaps required. Reeves touched the scar on his neck again, a seemingly unconscious habit. November 2019 to July 2020. Where were you, Sergeant? The question hung between them, heavy with implication. Briar's eyes met his, searching. You already know, she said quietly. It wasn't a question. Reeves nodded slowly. I think I do. I just need to hear you confirm it. Briar shook her head. I can't do that, Major. Can't or won't. Both. Her voice remained steady. Whatever you think you know about me, whatever Zephyr thinks he saw, it's better left alone. Reeves stepped closer, his voice dropping. I was there that night, in Romani Province. His fingers traced the scar on his neck. Took shrapnel here when our position was compromised. Our CO panicked, called for immediate extraction, leaving 3 of us exposed. Briar said nothing, her face revealing nothing, but her eyes never left his. I was bleeding out, Reeves continued. Mendez had lost his leg from an IED. Carver was unconscious from a concussion. We were as good as dead. Then someone came for us. Small build, night vision goggles, moved like a ghost. Sounds like you were lucky, Briar said neutrally. Wasn't luck. That operator dragged all 3 of us to safety under direct fire after our CO, Blackwood, froze. Reeves studied her face. Never saw their face clearly, but I remember what they said to me when I was fading in and out of consciousness. Briar tensed visibly now. They said, not your time, soldier. Keep fighting. Simple words, but I've never forgotten the voice. Reeves held her gaze. Your voice, Sergeant Thorne. The desert seemed to still around them, the distant sounds of gunfire from the range fading away. For a long moment, neither spoke. Finally, Briar broke the silence. What exactly are you asking of me, Major? Nothing. Reeves stepped back. Just wanted you to know that some of us remember, even if the Pentagon doesn't. He glanced toward the range. And maybe to warn you, Blackwood remembers too, in his own way. He spent years taking credit for that extraction, building his reputation on it. Having you here threatens that narrative. I'm just a medic assigned to range duty, Briar said, the practiced line sounding hollow, even to her own ears. We both know that's not true. Reeves turned to go, then paused. Whatever happens this afternoon, you're not alone here. As he walked away, Briar stood motionless, the desert heat pressing down on her. In her pocket, the challenge coin seemed to grow heavier. By 1400 hours, the range had filled with an unusual number of spectators. Word had spread about Blackwood's return after yesterday's confrontation. Soldiers from various units found reasons to be nearby, curiosity drawing them like moths to flame. Captain Sorrell looked nervous, checking and rechecking safety protocols. Zephyr's SEALs remained at their stations, a quiet presence that Breyer appreciated more than she would admit. Major Reeves had positioned himself at the observation post, ostensibly reviewing training reports. General Blackwood arrived precisely on time, surrounded by his staff. His face was a mask of professional detachment as he surveyed the range. When his eyes found Breyer, they hardened with recognition. "Sergeant Thorne," he called out, voice carrying across the range. Front and center. Breyer approached, stopping at a respectful distance. "Sir, I've been reviewing your performance as range supervisor," Blackwood said, loud enough for all to hear. "Your methods are unconventional. I believe in direct feedback, sir." A muscle twitched in Blackwood's jaw. "Indeed, perhaps too direct." He gestured to one of his aides, who brought forward a tablet. "Your service record makes for interesting reading, Sergeant. Combat medic with multiple deployments, several commendations for bravery under fire." Breyer remained silent, her posture perfect. "And yet," Blackwood continued, scrolling through the tablet, "there are curious omissions, periods of time unaccounted for." He looked up, eyes cold. "Care to explain?" "My record speaks for itself, sir." "Does it?" Blackwood handed the tablet back to his aide. "Because I made some calls last night, reached out to contacts in various commands where you supposedly served." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Funny thing, several commanders had no recollection of a Staff Sergeant Breyer Thorne serving under them during the dates listed." Murmurs spread through the watching soldiers. Breyer could feel Zephyr tensing nearby, ready to intervene. "Administrative errors happen, sir," she replied evenly. "Do they? Or is it more likely that your record has been sanitized, that you served somewhere else under a different designation?" Blackwood stepped closer, voice dropping so only those nearest could hear. "Perhaps with a unit that officially doesn't exist?" Breyer met his gaze unflinchingly. "Is there a question in there, sir?" Blackwood's composure slipped, just for a moment. "The question, Sergeant, is why someone with your specialized background would be assigned to supervise a firing range at my training exercise, unless it wasn't an assignment at all, but a message, someone putting you here to remind me of something I'd rather forget." "I go where I'm ordered, General." "Do you?" Blackwood's voice was dangerously soft now. "Or do you go where you can cause the most disruption to my command?" Before Breyer could respond, Zephyr stepped forward. "Sir, with respect, Sergeant Thorne has been exemplary in her duties here." Blackwood's gaze swiveled to the SEAL commander. "This doesn't concern you, Commander. When one of my team's support personnel is being questioned without cause, it does concern me," Zephyr replied calmly. "Your team?" Blackwood's eyebrows rose. "Sergeant Thorne is medical staff, not part of SEAL Team 8. She's been providing specialized tactical medical training to my operators," Zephyr said smoothly, "making her temporarily attached to my command." Major Reeves joined them, his presence adding another layer of tension to the confrontation. "General, perhaps this discussion would be better continued in private." Blackwood looked from Zephyr to Reeves, then back to Breyer, reading the unified front they presented. His face darkened with barely suppressed anger. "Fine," he said tightly. "Sergeant Thorne, report to my office at 1800 hours. We'll continue this discussion then." He turned to his staff. "The rest of you, commence with scheduled training." As Blackwood stalked away, Breyer released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Around her, the spectators began to disperse, disappointed that the anticipated showdown had been postponed. "That was close," Zephyr murmured. "He's not done," Reeves warned. "He's just changing tactics." "I can handle Blackwood," Breyer said, echoing her earlier words to Zephyr. "Maybe," Reeves conceded, "but you shouldn't have to, not alone." He exchanged a look with Zephyr. "We'll be nearby at 1800. "I don't need protection," Breyer insisted. "It's not protection," Zephyr corrected. "It's backup. Something I suspect you've been without for too long." The afternoon dragged on, the desert heat intensifying before beginning its gradual descent toward evening. Breyer continued supervising the range, but her mind kept returning to the confrontation with Blackwood and the inevitable meeting to come. At 1745, she secured the range and headed toward the command center where Blackwood's office was located. The compound was quieter now, most units having returned to their barracks for evening mess. The setting sun cast long shadows across the packed earth, painting the mountains in the distance with hues of orange and purple. As she approached the command center, Breyer noticed a familiar figure waiting outside, Captain Sorrel, looking uncharacteristically nervous. "Sergeant," he greeted her. "Got a minute?" Breyer checked her watch. "A few." "What is it, Captain?" Sorrel glanced around to ensure they weren't overheard. "Just wanted to give you a heads up. Blackwood's been making calls all afternoon, pulling strings with high-level brass at the Pentagon. Concerning me, among other things." Sorrel shifted uncomfortably. "Look, I don't know what's between you two, but he's gunning for you. Hard. And he's got friends in places that can make problems disappear, or create them. I appreciate the warning. There's more," Sorrel said, his voice dropping further. "He's requested your full, unredacted service record, used his 3-star privileges to override several security classifications." Breyer's expression remained neutral, but her heart rate accelerated. If Blackwood gained access to her complete record, the carefully constructed barriers between her past and present would crumble. "When will he receive it?" she asked calmly. "That's just it. He was denied. Whatever's in your file, it's protected by clearance levels even Blackwood can't touch." Sorrel looked both impressed and concerned. "Who the hell are you, Thorne?" Before she could answer, the command center door opened and an aide appeared. "Staff Sergeant Thorne, General Blackwood will see you now." Breyer nodded to Sorrel in thanks and followed the aide inside. The command center was a maze of offices and situation rooms, bustling with staff even at this hour. The aide led her to Blackwood's private office at the far end of the complex. "Enter," Blackwood's voice called in response to the aide's knock. Breyer stepped into the office, coming to attention as the door closed behind her. Blackwood sat behind his desk, surrounded by 3 computer monitors. He didn't look up immediately, making a show of reviewing something on his center screen. "Staff Sergeant Thorne reporting as ordered, sir," Breyer said, her voice steady. Blackwood finally looked up, his expression unreadable. "At ease, Sergeant." Breyer assumed parade rest, hands clasped behind her back, feet shoulder-width apart. The perfect picture of military discipline. "Do you know why I called you here?" Blackwood asked. "I assume it concerns our interaction at the range yesterday, sir." Blackwood leaned back in his chair, studying her. "Partly, but more specifically, it concerns this." He turned one of his monitors so she could see what was displayed. On the screen was an after-action report, heavily redacted, but the operation name was visible, Fallen Crown, the date, November 12, 2019, Ramani Province. Breyer's blood ran cold, though her expression revealed nothing. "Interesting reading," Blackwood continued. "According to this report, I led a heroic extraction of 3 wounded soldiers under enemy fire after our position was compromised." His eyes locked with hers. "That's the official story, the one that earned me my 3rd star." He stood, moving around his desk to stand directly in front of her. "But we both know that's not what happened, don't we, Sergeant? Or should I call you Wraith 7? The name hung in the air between them, a ghost from a past that was never supposed to follow her. For the first time since arriving at Maverick, Breyer felt the carefully constructed walls around her identity begin to crack. Blackwood reached into his pocket and withdrew something that glinted in the office's harsh lighting, a challenge coin identical to the one Breyer carried. Her eyes widened in genuine surprise. "Where did you get that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Blackwood's smile was cold. "From the body of your team leader, Wraith 1, after they pulled what was left of him out of that hellhole." He turned the coin over in his fingers. He was carrying 6 of these, 1 for each member of his team. 5 were distributed. The 6th was never found. Breyer finished, the memory surfacing unwillingly. "Until now," Blackwood set the coin on his desk with a sharp click. "I've spent 5 years building my career on what happened that night, Sergeant. 5 years climbing the ranks, securing my place in the hierarchy. And now you show up, a ghost from the past, threatening everything I've worked for. I was assigned here randomly, sir. I'm not a threat to anyone. Don't insult my intelligence," Blackwood snapped. "Nothing about the Wraith unit was ever random. Someone sent you here to send me a message." He stepped closer, invading her space. "Well, I've got a message of my own. Whatever you think you know, whatever you think you can prove, it won't matter. No one will believe the word of a sergeant over a decorated general. No one will risk exposing a black ops unit that officially never existed just to correct the historical record on one mission. Breyer met his gaze, her resolve hardening. With respect, sir, I'm not here to expose anything or anyone. I'm here to do my job. Your job, Blackwood repeated with a hollow laugh. Your job ended when they disbanded Wraith after that disaster in Ramani. You're a relic, Sergeant, a ghost that should have stayed buried. He picked up the challenge coin again, holding it up to the light. Just like your team. Something shifted in Breyer's eyes, a flash of controlled anger quickly suppressed. But Blackwood saw it and smiled, satisfied to have finally cracked her composure. That's what I thought, he said softly. Still carrying their ghosts with you, aren't you? The brave little medic who couldn't save her own team, but managed to rescue 3 strangers. He tossed the coin onto his desk. Touching story, but it ends here. Before Breyer could respond, a knock sounded at the office door. What? Blackwood barked. The door opened to reveal Major Reeves, Lieutenant Commander Zephyr, and Captain Sorrel standing together, their expressions grave. Apologies for the interruption, General, Reeves said formally. But we need Staff Sergeant Thorne for an urgent matter concerning tomorrow's joint medical evacuation exercise. Blackwood's eyes narrowed suspiciously. This meeting isn't finished. With respect, sir, Zephyr interjected. The JSOC commander has specifically requested Sergeant Thorne's input on the protocol revisions. He's waiting on video conference. Blackwood looked from the 3 officers to Breyer, clearly weighing his options. Finally, he nodded stiffly. Fine, we'll continue. This another time, Sergeant. His voice carried a clear threat beneath the professional veneer. Breyer came to attention. Yes, sir. She turned to go, then paused, looking back at the challenge coin still lying on Blackwood's desk. Without asking permission, she picked it up. This doesn't belong to you, sir, she said quietly. Before Blackwood could protest, she pocketed the coin and walked out, followed by the 3 officers who had come to her rescue. Once outside and clear of the command center, Reeves spoke first. That was too close. What happened in there? He knows, Breyer said simply. Everything. Zephyr cursed under his breath. How much trouble are we looking at? More than you want to be involved in, Breyer replied. All of you need to step back from this. Blackwood has the influence to make careers disappear. So does the JSOC commander, Reeves countered, who, by the way, is not actually waiting on a video conference. Despite the tension, Breyer's lips quirked in the ghost of a smile. Quick thinking. Look, Sorrel said, glancing nervously back at the command center. I don't know what's going on here, and I'm not sure I want to. But Blackwood crossed a line yesterday at the range, and he's crossing more lines now. Whatever history you have with him, you shouldn't have to face it alone. Breyer studied the 3 men, surprised by their united front on her behalf. Why are you doing this? You barely know me. Because some of us remember Ramani Province, Reeves said quietly, touching his neck scar. Some of us owe you our lives. And some of us believe in doing what's right, Zephyr added, even when it's not convenient. Sorrel nodded in agreement. So, what's the plan? Because Blackwood's not going to let this go. Breyer reached into her pocket, feeling the 2 challenge coins now nestled together. One rescued from the desert sand years ago, the other reclaimed moments ago from Blackwood's desk. The weight of them, and all they represented, settled in her palm. No, she agreed, he won't. Which means we need to end this. Tomorrow. The desert night had fully descended, stars appearing in the vast expanse above. In the distance, a coyote howled, a mournful sound that echoed across the empty landscape, calling others to gather. Similarly, the truth of who Staff Sergeant Breyer Thorne really was had begun to emerge from the shadows, calling forth allies and enemies alike to bear witness to what would come next. Have you ever witnessed a moment when someone's true character was revealed under pressure? When the person everyone underestimated turned out to be the strongest one in the room? Share your story in the comments. And if this resonates with you, join our community by subscribing for more powerful stories about hidden strength and unrecognized courage. Dawn arrived with a clarity that only the desert can provide. The air was crisp, the sky transforming from star-filled black to deep blue as the first rays of sun illuminated the eastern mountains. Breyer Thorne stood at the edge of firing range Delta, watching the compound come alive with the day's activities. She had slept little, her mind working through the events of yesterday and the confrontation to come. In her hand, she held both challenge coins, feeling their weight, not just the physical heft of metal, but the burden of memory and duty they represented. 6 operators, 1 unit that officially never existed. 5 coins buried with their owners. And now she held the 6th, the one Blackwood had taken from her team leader's body. She closed her fist around both coins as footsteps approached from behind. "Ready for today?" Major Reeves asked, coming to stand beside her. "As ready as I'll ever be," Breyer replied. "Zephyr's team is in position. Sorrel has adjusted the range schedule. Everything's set." Reeves glanced at her. "You sure about this? Once it's done, there's no going back." Breyer's eyes remained fixed on the horizon. "Some truths can't stay buried forever, Major, no matter how deep we try to bury them. And the consequences? I'll handle them. But the rest of you need to maintain deniability. If this goes sideways, I don't want anyone else's career affected." Reeves shook his head. "Too late for that. We're all in now." He checked his watch. "Blackwood's scheduled inspection is at 0900. That gives us just over 2 hours." "Then we should get started," Breyer said, pocketing the coins and turning toward the range. "I need to prepare the equipment." As they walked, Reeves studied her profile. "Can I ask you something, Sergeant?" "Depends on the question." "Why did you accept this assignment? After everything that happened, why come back to face Blackwood?" Breyer was silent for several steps before answering. "I didn't know he'd be here. The assignment came directly from command, routine Joint Forces support duty." She paused. "But once I saw him, I understood why I was sent." "Someone wanted you two to meet again," Reeves surmised. "Someone wanted the truth to come out," Breyer corrected, "without me having to break classification to tell it." The range was empty when they arrived, the target stands and shooting stations waiting silently for the day's activities. Breyer moved through her morning checks with practiced precision, inspecting each station meticulously. At precisely 0830, Lieutenant Commander Zephyr arrived with his SEAL team, their presence casual but deliberate. They spread out across the range, setting up equipment for what appeared to be standard training exercises. "Morning, Sergeant," Zephyr greeted Breyer. "Beautiful day for some target practice." "Commander," she nodded, "your team ready for the qualification drills?" "More than ready, though I hear we might have some high-profile observers today." "So I'm told." Zephyr stepped closer, speaking softly. "My men are briefed. They'll follow your lead, whatever happens." "I appreciate that, but remember, deniability." "I know?" Zephyr smiled grimly. "We're just here for routine training, nothing more." Captain Sorrel arrived next, clipboard in hand. "Range is clear for SEAL qualification until 0930. Then we transition to the joint demonstration." He glanced around nervously. "General Blackwood will be here with the foreign delegates and several senior officers from various branches." "Perfect," Breyer said. "The more witnesses, the better." "You really think this will work?" Sorrel asked. "It has to," Reeves answered for her. "Otherwise, Blackwood's version of history becomes the only one that matters." As Aero 900 approached, more personnel gathered at the range. Word had spread about another potential confrontation between the quiet medic and the intimidating general. Soldiers found excuses to be nearby, curiosity drawing them despite the risk of Blackwood's displeasure. At 0855, Breyer took position at the center of the range, her stance casual but her eyes alert. The 2 challenge coins were in her pocket, a tangible reminder of why she was here. She had removed her medical insignia, standing now as simply a soldier, neither hiding behind nor flaunting her specialized training. At exactly 0900, General Blackwood arrived, surrounded by his usual entourage of foreign observers and staff officers. His face darkened when he saw the assembled crowd, clearly understanding that something had been orchestrated. "What's the meaning of this?" he demanded of Captain Sorrel. "The schedule called for qualification drills, not a public spectacle." "Routine joint demonstration, sir," Sorrel replied, his voice steady despite his obvious nervousness. "Showcasing the integration of specialized units in tactical scenarios." Blackwood's eyes narrowed as he spotted Breyer standing center stage. "And who authorized Staff Sergeant Thorne to lead this demonstration?" "I did," Major Reeves stepped forward. "As training coordinator, I thought the sergeant's unique skill set would provide valuable insights for our allies." Blackwood's jaw tightened, recognizing the carefully laid trap. Too many witnesses, too many officers from different commands. He couldn't shut it down without raising questions about his authority and judgment. "Very well," he said tightly. "Proceed with the demonstration." Breyer stepped forward, her voice carrying across the range without needing amplification. "Today's demonstration focuses on tactical response under pressure, the ability to make critical decisions when lives are at stake." Her eyes met Blackwood's. Something every soldier must be prepared to do, regardless of rank. The foreign delegates nodded appreciatively, unaware of the subtext. Blackwood's expression remained frozen in a mask of professional interest, though his eyes communicated a clear warning. "Lieutenant Commander Zephyr's team will demonstrate advanced shooting techniques," Breyer continued, followed by a tactical scenario based on a real-world operation. At this, Blackwood stiffened, awed visibly. The first part of the demonstration proceeded smoothly. Zephyr's SEALs executed a flawless display of marksmanship and tactical movement, earning murmurs of approval from the observers. Throughout, Breyer narrated with precise technical knowledge that belied her medical designation. Then came the moment of transition. "For our final scenario," Breyer announced, "we'll recreate a critical extraction under enemy fire based on an operation in Rahmani Province, Afghanistan, November 12, 2019. A ripple passed through the assembled soldiers. Many had heard rumors about that night. An operation gone wrong, miraculous rescues, conflicting reports about who had done what. Blackwood stepped forward, his voice low but urgent. "Sergeant Thorne, a word." "After the demonstration, sir," Breyer replied, loud enough for others to hear. "We wouldn't want to keep our guests waiting." Blackwood was trapped, unable to object, without appearing obstructive in front of foreign dignitaries. He stepped back, fury evident in every line of his body. "Major Reeves will assist in this scenario," Breyer continued, as he was personally involved in the original operation. Reeves joined her at the center of the range, standing tall despite the tension. On November 12, 2019, a special operations team was compromised during a high-value target extraction in Rahmani Province, Breyer began, her voice steady. Enemy forces surrounded their position. 3 team members were critically wounded. She gestured to Zephyr's SEALs, who had positioned themselves at various points around the range, some lying on the ground, as if wounded. The team's commanding officer was faced with an impossible choice, Breyer continued. Stay and risk everyone dying, or retreat to safety and call for backup. All eyes turned to Blackwood, who stood rigidly at attention, his face a mask of controlled fury. The official report states that the commanding officer heroically remained behind, extracting all wounded personnel under direct enemy fire, Breyer said. That report earned him substantial recognition and career advancement. She paused, letting the words hang in the air. But that's not what happened, is it, General Blackwood? Complete silence fell over the range. Even the desert wind seemed to hold its breath. Staff Sergeant Thorne, Blackwood's voice was dangerously quiet. You are dangerously close to insubordination. Just telling the truth, sir, Breyer replied. Something long overdue. She reached into her pocket and withdrew both challenge coins, holding them up for all to see. The sun caught the metal, flashing bright against the desert backdrop. This is the insignia of a unit that officially never existed, she explained to the watching crowd. A specialized extraction team, codenamed Wraith. 6 operators, deployed only for the most critical rescue missions when all other options had failed. Murmurs spread through the ranks. Even the foreign delegates were leaning forward, with interest now. On November 12, 2019, Wraith Unit was activated after the original team was compromised. We found 3 wounded soldiers abandoned by their commanding officer, who had retreated to safety rather than risk his own life. Breyer turned to face Blackwood directly. General Blackwood was that commanding officer. The accusation landed like a physical blow. Blackwood's face flushed deep red. These allegations are preposterous, he sputtered. This is a blatant attempt to undermine my authority and smear my reputation. It's the truth, Major Reeves stepped forward. I was one of those wounded soldiers, left behind when the general ordered a full retreat. He touched the scar on his neck. I'd be dead if not for Wraith Unit, if not for Sergeant Thorne. All eyes swiveled between Blackwood, Breyer, and Reeves. This is absurd, Blackwood protested. There is no record of any unit called Wraith. The official after-action report clearly states, the report was classified and sanitized, Zephyr interrupted, stepping forward. "Standard procedure for Black Ops, but those of us who were there know what really happened." He turned to the assembled soldiers. "Talon team provided perimeter support for Wraith's extraction that night. We watched a single operator drag 3 wounded men to safety under direct enemy fire after their CO abandoned them. The foreign delegates were watching with intense interest now, understanding they were witnessing something significant beyond a simple training demonstration. Blackwood's composure cracked. "This is a coordinated attack on my command. I'll have all of you court-martialed for this insubordination." "It's not insubordination to speak the truth, sir," Breyer replied calmly. "And I have proof." She nodded to Captain Sorrell, who activated the range's display screen. A video began to play, night vision footage from a helmet camera. The grainy green images showed a battlefield in chaos, muzzle flashes illuminating the darkness. The footage focused on a small figure dragging a wounded soldier across open ground, bullets kicking up dirt around them, then returning for a second, then a third. The operator's movements were quick, decisive, professional, and unmistakably those of someone smaller than the average Special Forces soldier. "This footage was classified at the highest levels," Breyer explained, "buried along with the truth about what happened that night." "Where did you get that?" Blackwood demanded, his voice hollow with shock. "From the same place I got this." Breyer held up the second challenge coin, the one she had taken from his office, from someone who believed the truth should be known. The video continued, showing the small operator providing emergency medical treatment to the wounded soldiers. At one point, the camera caught a partial reflection of the rescuer's face in a metallic surface, just enough to see it was a woman. "Wraith 7, Zephyr said reverently. "The ghost." Operator, who became a legend among those who knew. The screen went black as the video ended. Silence hung over the range, heavy with the weight of revelation. Then, slowly, deliberately, Major Reeves raised his hand in a formal salute, directed not at Blackwood, but at Breyer Thorne. Zephyr followed suit, then his SEALs, then Captain Sorrell. One by one, the soldiers present raised their hands in salute, acknowledging the truth and the woman who had brought it to light. Blackwood stood alone, his authority crumbling before his eyes. "This doesn't change anything," he said desperately. "The Pentagon will never acknowledge a Black Ops unit publicly. Your word against mine means nothing." "It's not just her word anymore." A new voice joined the conversation. All heads turned to see Colonel Westergaard approaching, accompanied by a distinguished older man with 4 stars on his shoulders, General Maxwell, Joint Special Operations Command. "General Maxwell," Blackwood stammered, "I wasn't aware you were visiting Maverick today." "Special trip," Maxwell replied coolly. "When I received a request to declassify certain operational details regarding Romani Province, I thought I should deliver the news personally." He turned to address the assembled soldiers. "As of Oro 600 this morning, the Secretary of Defense has authorized limited disclosure regarding a specialized extraction unit that operated between 2017 and 2020. While many details remain classified, the Pentagon now officially acknowledges the existence of Wraith Unit and the heroic actions of its operators." Maxwell approached Breyer, his expression solemn. Staff Sergeant Thorne was Wraith 7, the unit's combat medic and extraction specialist. Of the original 6-person team, she is the only surviving operator. The others gave their lives in service to their country in a subsequent mission that remains classified. He turned to Blackwood, his voice hardening. "General Blackwood's role in the events of November 12, 2019 has been reassessed based on newly reviewed evidence. He is hereby relieved of command pending further investigation." Blackwood's face drained of color. "Sir, I can explain." "Save it for the inquiry board, Harlan," Maxwell cut him off. "You've had 5 years to tell the truth. That opportunity has passed." 2 military police officers appeared, flanking Blackwood discreetly. "Please escort the general to his quarters," Maxwell ordered. "He is restricted to the compound until transport arrives to return him to Washington." As Blackwood was led away, his gaze locked with Breyer's one final time, anger giving way to defeat as the truth he had buried for so long finally emerged into the desert sunlight. Maxwell turned back to Breyer. "Staff Sergeant Thorne, or should I say Chief Warrant Officer Thorne, your promotion paperwork was processed this morning." Stunned murmurs spread through the crowd. A field promotion of that magnitude was almost unheard of. "Thank you, sir." Breyer, replied, her composure finally showing cracks of emotion. But I never sought recognition for what happened that night. Which is precisely why you deserve it, Maxwell responded. The best operators aren't those who seek glory, but those who do what's necessary when no one is watching. He gestured to the challenge coins still in her hand. Those were never meant to be buried, Chief. They were meant to remind us of the standard to uphold. The formality of the moment dissolved as soldiers began to approach Breyer, offering handshakes, words of respect, or simply nodding in acknowledgement. The foreign delegates watched with newfound appreciation, understanding they had witnessed something rare and significant. Major Reeves made his way to Breyer's side. So, Chief Warrant Officer Thorne, what happens now? Now? Breyer looked around at the soldiers gathering on the range, many of whom were watching her with new understanding and respect. Now we get back to training. These units still need to learn proper tactical extraction techniques. Reeves smiled. And who better to teach them than Wraith 7 herself? As the crowd began to reorganize for continued training, Zephyr approached Breyer, extending his hand. It's been an honor, Chief. She took his hand. The honor was mine, Commander. Your team performed admirably today. Just following your lead. Zephyr hesitated, then asked, the other Wraith operators, your team, what happened to them? A shadow passed over Breyer's face. That remains classified, but they died as they lived, saving others. Zephyr nodded, understanding there were still boundaries he shouldn't cross. Their legacy lives on through you. That's what I'm counting on, Breyer replied. The day progressed with a renewed energy across the training compound. Word of the morning's event spread rapidly, transforming the quiet medic into something of a legend overnight. Soldiers who had barely noticed her before now watched her with respect bordering on awe. By evening, Breyer found herself in an unexpected position, instructing a specially formed class of operators from various branches on advanced extraction techniques. The range had been reconfigured to simulate urban combat scenarios, with Breyer demonstrating movements that blended stealth, speed, and precision. The key is efficiency, she explained to the attentive group. Every second counts when you're operating behind enemy lines. Move decisively, treat rapidly, extract immediately. She demonstrated a technique for dragging a wounded comrade while maintaining a firing position. Her movements fluid despite her slight build. Size doesn't matter, she continued, addressing an unspoken question in many of their eyes. Technique and leverage do. Anyone, regardless of physical stature, can execute a proper extraction if they understand the mechanics. As the instruction continued, Breyer felt something she hadn't experienced in years, the satisfaction of passing on hard-won. Knowledge of ensuring that the lessons paid for with her team's blood would not be forgotten. After the training session concluded, she found a moment of solitude at the edge of the range. The desert sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, the mountains standing in silhouette against the dying light. She withdrew the challenge coins from her pocket, studying them in the fading glow. General Maxwell approached quietly, standing beside her in companionable silence for several moments before speaking. Beautiful evening, he observed. Yes, sir. You know, I fought the creation of Wraith Unit initially, Maxwell admitted. Thought it was too risky, too unorthodox. But your team proved me wrong, mission after mission. Breyer looked up at him. Why reveal the truth now, after all this time? Maxwell sighed. Some secrets serve a purpose, Chief. Others only serve to protect the wrong people. He nodded toward where Blackwood had stood that morning. What he did, taking credit for your team's actions, building his career on a lie, that couldn't stand, not anymore. And the timing? Why now? Because you were ready, Maxwell replied simply. After your team was lost, you retreated into the shadows, buried yourself in routine medical duties. But the Pentagon never lost track of you. We were waiting for the right moment to bring you back into the fold. By sending me to the same base as Blackwood, Breyer realized, a confrontation was inevitable. Precisely. Though I admit, your public demonstration was more dramatic than we anticipated. A smile touched Maxwell's weathered face. Effective, though. Sometimes the truth needs witnesses to survive. Breyer looked down at the coins in her palm. What happens to Wraith Unit now? To its legacy? That depends on you, Maxwell said. The Secretary has authorized the formation of a new specialized training detachment. Ghost operators teaching the next generation of extraction specialists. He turned to face her fully. We need someone to lead it. Someone who understands both the tactics and the cost. Briar's breath caught. You want me to rebuild Wraith. Not rebuild, evolve. Maxwell gestured toward the range where soldiers were still discussing the day's revelations. Those men and women need someone who can teach them not just how to fight, but when and why to risk everything for their comrades. I'm not sure I'm the right person for that role, sir. You're exactly the right person, Chief. You never sought recognition or advancement. You simply did what was necessary when it mattered most. Maxwell straightened. Think about it. You have until morning to decide. As he walked away, Briar remained at the edge of the range, watching the last light fade from the sky. Stars began to appear, countless points of light in the vast desert darkness. Major Reeves joined her, a cup of coffee in each hand. He offered one to her, which she accepted gratefully. Quite a day, he observed. That's an understatement, Briar replied. So what happens now? Back to being a combat medic? Briar took a sip of coffee, considering her response. General Maxwell offered me a training command, building a new extraction unit, teaching specialized tactics. Reeves nodded appreciatively. About time. The military needs more instructors who've actually done the job in the worst conditions imaginable. He glanced at her. You gonna take it? I don't know yet. What's holding you back? Briar's gaze returned to the stars above. For years, I've been living in the shadows. No attachments, no recognition, no legacy beyond classified mission reports. I'm not sure I know how to step into the light. If anyone can figure it out, it's you. Reeves touched the scar on his neck again. You saved my life that night, not just physically, but in ways I'm still discovering. He paused. What were those words you said to me when I was fading in and out of consciousness? Not your time, soldier. Keep fighting, Briar recalled softly. Those words kept me going through months of recovery, through nightmares and doubts and pain. Reeves's voice grew earnest. Imagine what you could do with a whole generation of operators, teaching them not just how to extract the wounded, but how to carry that kind of strength. They stood in silence for a while, watching as more stars appeared in the darkening sky. The sounds of the compound gradually quieted as soldiers retired to their barracks. Your team, Reeves said finally. The other Wraith operators, would they want you to take this opportunity? Briar's hand closed around the challenge coins, feeling their weight and all they represented. They never wanted recognition. None of us did. We just wanted to make a difference when it mattered most. And you did, Reeves assured her. You still can. Morning arrived with the same desert clarity as the day before, but everything else had changed. Briar stood outside General Maxwell's temporary office, her decision made. She knocked crisply on the door. Enter, Maxwell called. Briar stepped inside, coming to attention. Chief Warrant Officer Thorne, reporting as requested, sir. Maxwell looked up from his desk. At ease, Chief. Have you reached a decision? I have, sir. Briar placed both challenge coins on his desk. I'll accept the training command with one condition. And that is? The new unit doesn't carry the Wraith designation. That belonged to my team and should be retired with them. Briar stood straight, her voice firm. But their legacy, what they stood for, that should live on. Maxwell picked up the coins, examining them thoughtfully. What designation would you suggest instead? Phoenix, sir. Briar met his gaze steadily, rising from the ashes, carrying forward what came before. A slow smile spread across Maxwell's face. Phoenix it is. He returned one coin to her, keeping the other. This stays with you as a reminder of where you came from. The other will be displayed at the new training facility to remind everyone else. Thank you, sir. No, Chief Thorne, thank you. Maxwell stood, extending his hand. Report to Fort Bragg in 2 weeks. Your team will be waiting. As Briar left the office, she found the compound alive with morning activity. Units were preparing for the day's training. Equipment was being moved, orders shouted across the packed earth. Just like her first day at Maverick, except now, faces turned toward her with recognition and respect as she passed. At the edge of the parade ground, she found Lieutenant Commander Zephyr waiting with his team. Heard the news, he said as she approached. Training command, congratulations, Chief. Word travels fast, Briar observed. In our circles, like lightning. Zephyr grinned. My team's putting in transfer requests as we speak. They all want to train under the legendary Wraith 7. Phoenix now, Briar corrected him. New designation, new beginning. Phoenix, Zephyr repeated thoughtfully. I like it. Major Reeves joined them, nodding and greeting. So, you're leaving us, Chief? Orders are orders, Briar replied with a small smile, echoing her words from days earlier. Well, before you go, there's something you should see. Reeves gestured toward the firing range. Captain Sorrell's been busy. Curious, Briar followed them to Range Delta. What she saw there stopped her in her tracks. The range had been transformed overnight. New equipment had been set up, advanced tactical scenarios mapped out. But what caught her attention was the flagpole at the center. Flying both the American flag and beneath it, a new standard, black with a crimson phoenix rising from flame. Around the range stood soldiers from every unit at Maverick, formed up in perfect rows. As Briar approached, Captain Sorrell called out, "Attention!" As one, the assembled troops snapped to attention, rendering a perfect salute. Briar halted, overwhelmed by the display. After a moment's hesitation, she returned the salute crisply. "At ease," she called, her voice carrying across the range. The soldiers relaxed their posture, but remained in formation, awaiting her words. Briar looked out at the faces before her. Marines, Army Rangers, SEALs, Air Force Para-Rescue, the elite of America's military forces, all standing in respect not for her rank, but for what she represented. For years I served in silence, she began, finding her voice. My team and I operated in darkness, leaving no trace, seeking no recognition. We believed that was the highest form of service, doing what was necessary when no one was watching. The desert wind caught the Phoenix flag, unfurling it fully in the morning light. But there's another kind of service equally valuable, passing on what we've learned so that others may carry it forward. The tactics, the techniques, but most importantly, the principles that guide us in the most difficult moments. Briar's voice strengthened with conviction. When to act, why to risk everything, how to keep fighting when all seems lost. She touched the challenge coin in her pocket, drawing strength from its presence. Beginning today, I'll be establishing a new training detachment, Phoenix, dedicated to advanced extraction techniques and tactical medicine. Those interested in joining should speak with your commanding officers. Selection will be rigorous, training will be demanding, but for those who succeed, you'll carry forward a legacy born in the darkest corners of our most difficult conflicts. Briar paused, looking across the faces watching her with rapt attention. You won't become famous, your names won't appear in history books, but somewhere, sometime, when it matters most, you'll be the difference between life and death for someone who believes all hope is lost. Her voice dropped, resonating with quiet intensity. And in that moment, nothing else will matter. As she concluded, the range remained silent for a heartbeat before erupting in cheers and applause. Soldiers broke formation to approach her, eager to express interest in her program or simply to shake her hand. Major Reeves stood back, watching with satisfaction as the quiet medic who had arrived days ago now stood at the center of attention, her true identity and capabilities finally acknowledged. You know, Zephyr said, coming to stand beside him, when they tell this story years from now, no one will believe it actually happened. Some stories are like that, Reeves replied, too perfect to be anything but true. As the day progressed into afternoon, Briar found a moment of solitude at the same spot where she had stood on her first day at Maverick. The desert stretched before her, vast and unchanging, while behind her, the compound bustled with activity. She withdrew the challenge coin one last time, studying the winged serpent wrapped around the medical caduceus. Then, with deliberate care, she tucked it away. Not forgotten, but incorporated into the foundation of whatever would come next. The desert wind picked up, carrying with it the sounds of soldiers training, of life continuing. Briar turned back toward the range, where her new role awaited. The Phoenix flag flew above, catching the sunlight, a symbol of rebirth and continuation. Some ghosts, it seemed, were never meant to stay buried. Some were meant to rise, to transform, to inspire, to remind us that true strength isn't found in rank or authority, but in the quiet resolve to do what's right when everything is at stake. In a world where we're often measured by outward accomplishments and public recognition, who are the quiet heroes in your life? those who lead by example rather than authority, who do what's right not for glory, but because it's who they are. Share your stories in the comments below, and join our community to celebrate these unsung heroes who redefine what true strength looks like.